It is 2 p.m., so it's time we get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Rodale Institute webinar. My name is Yi Chaorui. I am a soil scientist at Rodale Institute. So at Rodale, I oversee soil health research, supporting all short-term and long-term research projects. And today, we're going to talk about one interesting project, the PASA soil health benchmark study, in which we investigate soil health as affected by management on row crop, vegetable, and pastured livestock farms. And before we get started, here are some notes about today's webinar. So during the talk, I cannot hear you. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function to send through your questions, and I will respond to each of them at the end of the presentation. And if you experience any technical difficulties, please call Maria Pop, Director of Education, on 610-683-1481. And just so you know that, as usual, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website and social media, so you can watch it later. And very briefly, I would like to introduce the history of Rodale Institute to people who are not familiar with it. Founded by J.I. Rodale in 1947, Rodale Institute is widely considered as the birthplace of organic agriculture in the United States. We believe that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. And the Rodale Institute headquarters is located in Kutztown, Pennsylvania. But we also have 3 regional resource centers across the country, one in Iowa, one in Georgia, and one in California. So if you are from those areas, please reach out and go to our website to find more information that might be beneficial. So our mission is to improve the health of the people and the planet through organic leadership, and certainly soil health is an important part of planetary health. Why soil health? Because soil health are at the center of many most urgent environmental problems that our society is facing. Healthy soil is essential to our ability to continuously produce abundant and nutritious food to feed the growing global population. And also, soil health is also critical to protecting water resources. The nutrient leaching and the runoff from the soils are detrimental to water quality. And because soil also has enormous potential to store a lot of carbon, so the soil is the front line to fight climate change. Without healthy soils, farmers will have to use increasing chemical input in order to maintain yield, leading to many environmental and social problems. That's why soil health is fundamental to our health and our society and our future. Just as there is growing consensus about the importance of soil health, there's also an emerging agreement about the practical steps that farmers can take to improve their soil health. Actually, a lot of farmers are already actively working to implement the core principles of soil health management. So these principles usually include reducing disturbance, maximizing cover, increasing biodiversity, and integrating livestock. But while these principles are easy to understand in concept, it's much more challenging to bring them into practice with all the challenges of a working farm. For example, how to design a crop rotation that allows a proper window to get some cover crops planted. So as a result, to develop a soil health management strategy that makes sense and can bring real results, farmers, they need at least 2 elements. First, accurate assessments of soil health over time. And second, a supportive network that they can work with to exchange ideas and compare results and also generate innovations. So the soil health benchmark study is this kind of study that's needed. It is a community science project designed to support farmers in the process of peer-to-peer learning and continuous improvement. It was initiated and managed by PASA, the Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Agriculture, with Rodale Institute as a research collaborator. Dr. Franklin Egan is the manager of the project. So the idea is to engage a community of farmers working together, support them with the data and the community networks that can help them meet the challenges ahead, and together grow a more sustainable future. The project started in 2016, and the number of farms participated in the study is continuously increasing in the last 4 years. And there are 3 primary farm cohorts in the study: pastured livestock, row crop, and vegetables. Farmers are recruited through an open enrollment process of events, email lists, and word of mouth. And this map shows the farms participated in this project in 2019. You can see that most of them are located across Pennsylvania, but there are also several farms in Maryland. So within each cohort, there's also a great diversity of farming systems. For example, the row crop cohort consists of conventional tillage system, no-till system, and organic system. Likewise, the organic system also consists of seasonal cover crops, or full season cover crops, and livestock integration. And the pastured livestock system also is managed in very diverse ways, grazed by different kind of animals, livestock. So each year, we work with farmers to take soil samples from their fields after harvest. Then these samples will be immediately sent to the soil analysis lab of Cornell University for analysis. Farmers then will compile and submit their farm data and management record of that year. After the results of soil analysis and farm data are received by PASA, data analysis will be conducted, and the results will be shared with farmers individually and also discussed collectively on webinars and conferences. So at each farm, we consult with collaborating farmers to choose 3 fields that best represent their typical rotation practices. For instance, if a vegetable farmer practices a 3-year rotation with some fall brassicas in the first year, then tomatoes and peppers in the next year, to a full cover crop in the 3rd year, we would choose 1 field in each of these crop rotation phases for soil sampling. We collect soil samples to a depth of 6 inches, which is 15 centimeters, from 5 locations in the field, homogenized the samples, and submitted them to the Cornell Comprehensive Assessment of Soil Health, the CASH. And Cornell runs a series of tests evaluating 10 different physical, chemical, and biological indicators of soil health. For example, the aggregate stability reflects how well the soil can hold together and is an indicator of soil physical stability. Soil protein implies the soil's ability to provide available nitrogen from organic matter mineralization. And the active carbon showed amount of labile carbon in organic matter that can serve as the labile food source for the soil microbes, indicating the biological activity of soil. So for each indicator, Cornell returns both the original measured values and a rating, a score from 0 to 100 points. So when collaborating farmers submit their logs of farm operations, they can use either the template of Excel spreadsheets provided by PASA or the Farm OS smartphone app. These farm data would include the tillage, cultivation, and any farm operations involving soil disturbance or compaction, and planting and termination dates for cash and cover crops, and application rates and quantities for all the fertilizers and soil amendments. We then organize these data and generate 3 additional management indicators that provide a snapshot into some of the management practices that most influence soil health. These additional management indicators are tillage intensity, days of living crops, including cash and cover crops, and external organic input rates. The tillage intensity was calculated based on the soil tillage intensity rating by NRCS. So in this index, you can see that a roller crimper or a grain drill that has minimal soil disturbance would have a very low soil tillage index score, while the operations like chisel plow or mobile plow will have much higher soil tillage intensity index score. So we then sum up all these operations of the single season and get a final score for the soil tillage intensity of that particular field. So these data can not only provide us information such as the relationship between the soil health and management practices, including tillage intensity, days of living crops, and organic input, but also the benchmarks of soil properties that the row crop, vegetable, and livestock farmers can target as their goals for their long-term management. And when the results are shared with the farmers, it will include not only the values of each of the soil properties, but also the ratings based on the Cornell assessments, but also where their fields are at among their peers. For example, for this farm, the pH of the 3 fields is between 6 to 7, which is in the middle range of all the farms participated in this study. So, and it was rated as optimal by the Cornell rating system. And this one, the active carbon of the 3 fields of this farm are ranged in the low end among all the farms, and also rated as low to average by the Cornell rating system. So by comparing their data with other farms, the farmers can then plan strategically to improve their soil health. For example, improve the active carbon content of the soil to improve the biological property activities of the soil. So now I'm going to share with you some updates of the data that have been analyzed. So for its simplicity, I'm going to focus on the data collected in 2018, but we'll also present some interannual variation across the different years that are worth mentioning. But before we take a look at the soil data, let's first take a look at the management indicators of the different systems. So we can see that the 3 systems are managed in very different ways. For example, the vegetable systems, which is the orange bar, has the much higher tillage intensity than row crop and pasture systems. And the pasture system has the lowest tillage intensity. And for days of living crops, including cash and cover crops, the pasture also has the largest number, close to a total of 360 days in a year, while the vegetable system have the lowest number of days of living crops. So this shows that vegetable farms are typically more tillage intensive but less cover cropped. than both row crop and pasture systems. But when it comes to the external organic matter input, vegetable systems also lead in organic input rates. So as a result, the pastured livestock system has the highest Cornell soil health score. And there is no significant difference between the row crop and vegetable systems in the overall soil health score by the Cornell rating system. But if you look at the individual soil health indicators, we will see that the pasture livestock system is also almost leading in every single indicators. Although there are sometimes differences, the difference is not significant, but the trend is clear that the pasture livestock is leading all the soil health indicators. Sometimes there's lack of significance, maybe because of the limited number of farms, the livestock farms involved in this study. We will try to increase the numbers of the farms of all the cohorts in the future. You can see the trend is pretty clear. This suggests that the perennial pasture system grazed by animals is an effective way to restore soil health. Also, it's worth mentioning that although there's no significant difference in the overall Cornell soil health score between the vegetable and the row crop system, the two systems show very different patterns in individual soil health indicators. For example, the vegetable system show the lowest aggregate stability, but the highest phosphorus levels. So this might be because the more intensive tillage used in the vegetable system that also have contributed to the low aggregate stability. But the vegetable farms also tend to use more organic input, such as compost or manure. This might have contributed to the high soil organic matter level, but also the higher phosphorus level than the row crop systems. So we know that the phosphorus runoff from the soil from the farms can cause significant environmental problems, such as the eutrophication of the waterways. So therefore, what the vegetable farmers want to do may be reducing their use of tillage and also not to overapply the organic amendments. And we want to look at the relationship between soil organic matter and the individual soil health scores, because sometimes people would think that, well, the soil health, soil properties might be controlled by something like the intrinsic soil properties. For example, the texture. A clayer soil would have a higher soil health score than a sandy soil. That might be true. But let's take a look at the relationship between soil organic matter and soil health indicators. Also, the relationship between soil texture, the clay content, and soil health indicators. So here we can see that the relationships between soil organic matter with these individual soil health indicators, such as aggregate stability, water holding capacity, active carbon, and soil protein, they are all very close. But if you look at the relationship between soil texture, here is the percentage of silt plus clay. The relationship between soil texture and the soil health indicators, you can see that the relationship is not as close as the relationship between soil organic matter. The only exception is the water holding capacity, which is very closely related to the silt and clay percentage of the soil, which makes sense because, you know, with more clay soils, the increase of large surface areas can increase water retention of the system. But the texture of soil is something we cannot change. At least we can improve soil organic matter to improve all these soil health indicators. So again, that shows soil organic matter is really central to soil health. Any measure that can improve soil organic matter would have, resulting in benefits in individual biological, physical, and chemical soil health indicators. And then let's take a look at all the 3 management indicators, how they affect or how they are related to the individual soil health indicators. First of all, the tillage intensity. The first question we want to ask is soil organic matter content closely related to tillage intensity? Because we always hear that if I reduce tillage, then I can improve soil organic matter or soil carbon content. So we want to see if that's universally true, whether reducing tillage can result in consistent increase in soil organic matter. Then we also want to ask whether including a mobile plow, which is a more intensive form of tillage, whether including operations like a mobile plow is a critical factor for soil health. First of all, the relationship between the tillage intensity with soil organic matter and aggregate stability. So we can see that tillage is closely related with aggregate stability, but not soil organic matter. So that shows that aggregate stability as a physical property of the soil structure, it is negatively affected by the tillage intensity. When you increase your tillage intensity or frequency, or the overall tillage intensity, there's a large chance that your aggregate stability of soil will decrease. However, the relationship between tillage intensity and the soil organic matter is not close. It's not as close as the relationship between tillage intensity and aggregate stability. So that shows that soil organic matter might be controlled by something else. For example, organic input, right? So there are other factors that would affect the level of soil organic matter across a large scale. By just reducing the tillage intensity might not always cause a positive increase in soil organic matter. Also, whether including a mobile plow is critical to soil organic matter or aggregate stability, then we can see that although the difference is not significant, but the trend is clear that using a mobile plow is associated with lower soil organic matter and lower aggregate stability. So any effort that would avoid using the intensive operation like a mobile plow would result benefit in aggregate stability and soil organic matter. So that's a direction we would want to focus towards in the future. And second index is the days of living crops, including the cash and cover crops. So we want to ask, is there a close relationship between soil health and the days of living crops? Because we know that putting in a cover crop can reduce the risk of erosion, can maintain soil health, can improve soil organic matter. So here we did a correlation analysis to look at the relationship between days of living crops and the soil health, soil organic matter, and active carbon. So as you can see that there's no immediate relationship between days of living crops and soil health. That might be related to the number of farms participating in the study, and also the variation of the actual farm operations in each of the farms across a large geographical scale. Each of the farm is managing things a little bit differently. So when you look at this large data set across a large geographical scale, then the relationship between days of living crops and soil health might not be so intuitive. And then external organic matter inputs, the relationships of soil health indicators with rates of external organic inputs, because we know that organic input can help reduce or eliminate the use of synthetic input, can still stimulate microbial activity in the soil. So there might be significant benefits of external organic input with soil, in soil health. However, we found that the relationship between the rate of organic input and soil health indicators are not very tight, not very close in this study. Again, I want to mention that the x-axis, the organic matter input rate, ton dry matter per acre, it's the rate of organic matter in this particular year of the soil sampling. So it does not reflect the historical input of from organic matter resources in the last 10 decades. So that shows that a snapshot of the organic matter input of a short term might not be closely associated with any soil health indicators. We might want to look at things from more long-term perspective. And something about climate change, because we conduct this long-term study, we want to capture the interannual variation and see how climate affect these soil health indicators across these different systems. And we found very interesting results. We found typically tough climate is tough on soil health. So here's the trend in aggregate stability ratings of the different systems from 2017 to 2019. So we can see that in the row crop and vegetable systems, there's a very drastic decline of aggregate stability rating from 2017 to 2018. And then there's a bounce back of aggregate stability from 2018 to 2019. If you're from this area, you might recall that 2018, the year of 2018 is an extreme wet year, right? There are a lot of extreme rainfalls, precipitation. So we hypothesize that might be the direct cause of the drastic decline, the collapse of aggregate stability of the row crop and the vegetable systems in 2018. So, and it's also worth mentioning that the pastured livestock systems had much higher aggregate stability rating than row crop and vegetable systems. And it seems that it was less affected by the climate extremes in 2018. So it shows that the pastured livestock systems has more resilient soil aggregate stability. And what's more interesting is that if you look at each of these different systems from 2018 to 2019, we can see that the no-till row crop systems rebounded their aggregate stability more than the tilled row crop and vegetable systems. So the second gray bar is the no-till row crop system. We can see that it's very similar to the tilled row crop and tilled vegetable system in the year of 2018. But then in the year of 2019, the no-till row crop system rebounded the aggregate stability much more than the tilled system, including the row crop and the vegetable system. That shows that the no-till practices can help the soil aggregate stability rebound faster from climate extremes. That might be something interesting to know and to incorporate in our future operations, that although there's climate change, but if we can incorporate more conservation practices such as no-till, we can continuously reducing our tillage intensity, then there's a chance we can be more resilient and rebound faster from the climate extremes. Okay, so here is some summary of this study. So far, we can see that the pastured livestock system shows better soil health than the vegetable and the row crop systems. And that's, I guess, a result of the, perenniality of the pasture system, the continuous, organic input, especially from the below ground organic input, and also the nitrogen nutrient cycling, facilitated by the livestock integration. So anything that can help our row crop and the vegetable system can move towards a pastured system would result in benefits in soil health. Also, soil organic matter is central to soil health. If we can keep improving our soil organic matter, then we are moving towards better soil health in any of these systems. Also, tillage intensity is closely related to aggregate stability, the physical property or the structure of the soil, but not necessarily with soil organic matter. Soil organic matter is, maybe controlled or driven by many factors. We want to reduce tillage intensity, but we also want to include, other, conservation or regenerative practices, such, optimized organic input and, including, cover crops, especially legume cover crops in a system that can, or the holistic way, not just reducing tillage intensity, can help us improve soil organic matter and achieve, better soil health. And then, last but not least, no-till and perennial systems are more resilient to climate extremes. So I think that's an important lesson we learned from this study. Before we wrap up, I would like to talk about some lessons I have learned from this study. So first, soil health is really key to adapt to climate change, and continuously enhancing the perenniality and avoiding incentive tillage can improve soil health, right? Again, these might be, easy to understand in concept, but the question is how, right? So that's something, maybe each of the farmers can think of, specifically for their farm operations. I guess if we can, design a long-term strategy of crop rotation with a balanced cash and the cover crops, organic input, and reducing tillage, then we have a better chance of achieving that goal of soil health. And the next step of the PASA soil health benchmark study. So in this year, the year of 2020, we're gonna include several more components to this project. First of all, we will include an in-field test, which is the infiltration measurement in each of the farms. So the infiltration measures how fast, how well the water can penetrate, can infiltrate in the soil profile. Because if the soil has, a better soil structure with, soil pore structures, then it has better infiltration and less chance of erosion and runoff. Also, we have included a nutrient density project for the vegetable cohort. We will look at the relationship between the nutrient density of vegetables and their management practices. I would like to thank all these people for the opportunity to be working in this project. First of all, I would like to thank PASA Sustainable Agriculture, especially Dr. Franklin Egan and Sarah Benawa, for the opportunity to working in this project and the data analysis. Also, my colleagues at the Rodale Institute, Dr. Andrew Smith, our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Scientist, Jessica Land, the Research Coordinator, Dan Kemper, the Assistant Farm Manager, and Elodie Martin Abad, our research intern from France, participated in the field soil sampling and menu discussion, and Alexandra Dutt, the research technician who helped gathering the farm record. Thank you all for your participation. And for William Penn Foundation for your financial support for this important project. And I would like to thank many, many amazing farmers. I've been in many conference calls with you, and I was so impressed by your enthusiasm and your expertise and knowledge, and most importantly, your target to improve soil health. You are the heroes of our society. So thank you for that. With that, I would like to wrap up and open up for questions. Thank you for your attention. Okay. Let's take a look at the Q&A. There's no question there yet. So we still have some time. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function of the Zoom and send through your questions. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions. Oh, we have a question here. So there's a question from ML. Do you have experience working with trace genomics DNA test? I think you mean genomics DNA testing, right? Yes, that's yes, DNA testing. So I guess this question is about the biological, health of soil health and the relationship between with the soil farm management practices. Although it is not part of this project, but I can elaborate a little bit more about that aspect. So I guess the DNA testing is just a tool that we use to look at the microbial function and diversity, right? So it's important to look at not just the general, the microbial numbers, the microbial abundance, but also the diversity and the functions of each of them perform. Although it's not part of this project, but there is enough evidence from our research, but also from those research around the world, that if we can diversify organic input and we can diversify our rotations and also protect the physical structure of the soil, then we can improve what we call the complexity, including the microbial diversity and the functions they perform. Right? So, for example, there are many functions we need in the soil. For example, organic matter decomposition. We need a diverse group of microorganisms to decompose the soil organic matter. Each steps of the organic matter decomposition are performed by different microorganisms. We need them to be, active, to be, producing all kinds of extracellular enzyme to break down organic matter to release the nutrient to support plant, crop. So if the thing is that if we simplify our crop rotation and our operations, then the microbes are constrained. For example, in the large areas of the Midwest, you can see only corn and soybean, right? These crops not only have very simplified input for the microbes, they are also very high carbon to nitrogen ratio. High carbon to nitrogen ratio can result in stress for the microbes. Then the microbial diversity will decline and tend to not perform enough function to something like organic matter decomposition and plant microbe interaction. So the answer is that there's enough evidence if we can improve our crop rotation to supply diverse input of organic matter sources for the microbes, then there's chance we improve the microbial diversity. then we have improved soil health. There's another question about the nutrient density project coming up. Yes, the nutrient density, it's a new component of this project. It's, I believe it's ongoing. So we haven't had any data coming together yet, but the PASA staff are actively working with our farmers, collecting those data. So I believe in the near future, in the wintertime, we'll be able to, to put together those data, put some analysis and share that data in our, webinars or conference calls. Please, keep an eye on the PASA newsletter or social media. There's an interesting question from D. Williams. It will be interesting to do shotgun sequencing to determine the biological composition of the soils. Yes, that's an interesting question. So these kind of metagenomics tools would be very useful for identify the function that the microbes perform in different soils. And we already have some projects going on, and we have proposed written to conduct more study of that. But again, it's not part of this, large study. And if you are D. Williams, if you are a researcher from any institutions, please reach out, and we can talk about collaborations and maybe put up some proposals together. And thank you for your question. That was really good. Thank you for the suggestion. There's a question from Jason. Do you have any observation regarding the number of animals per hectare needed for attaining good soil health within a period? Also, there are any suggestions about the ratio of different types of crops? The ratio of different types of crops to be grown, helping increase soil health. These are great questions. I think there's no silver bullet answer to that, because soils are very different across different regions. There's a high variation from place to place. So there's no single answer to that. But it's a good question. I think if you're from a certain area, it might be good to reach out to your local extension agent and to look at your detailed soil type to see the optimal numbers of the soil health indicators, for including the number of soil animals needed to maintain soil health, and the ratio of different crops, different type of crops to be grown to increase soil health. Generally, more complexity, more diversity would be better to improve soil health. But again, farming is very different from nature. Agriculture is very different from nature, because we want to achieve our goals, not just the best, soil health or best microbial biomass or aggregate stability. We also want to produce food to feed the people. We want to maintain high crop productivity, high yield, right? So I guess then it's a question between, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off between the yield, productivity, and soil health. For example, if we continuously, produce corn every single year, we put in a lot of, fertilizers. That's best for, productivity, yield, but not good for soil health. But we put in, as I showed, that the livestock system has the best soil health. But if we only use the livestock, the pasture, for every single farm in the world, then we don't have grains to eat, right? So I guess, diverse rotation, including the grains and some, pasture phase, including livestock. Also, diversified grains, and especially small grains and more legume cover crops would help increase the soil health. I mentioned the legume cover crop because we now know that the low carbon to nitrogen ratio leguminous cover crops or cash crops like the alfalfa, 3 or 4 years alfalfa, can improve not just the microbial abundance, also can be beneficial for carbon sequestration. Okay. Let's see if there are any other questions. Let's see, there's from we still have some time. If you have questions, please send them through. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And again, thank you, each of you, for attending this webinar. And please reach out if you have any questions. Here's another question from Jason. How is the rainfall pattern affecting the soil health? That's a great question. So the rainfall pattern, it has a lot to do with soil health. As I said, we can see that clearly the climate extremes in the year of 2018 in eastern United States, in this part of the United States, clearly affected aggregate stability and so other soil properties. So we have other trials ongoing here at the Rodale Institute. We also observed that trend in 2018. A lot of the soil health properties declined because of the extreme rainfall. But I would also want to mention that the rainfall or climate extreme also affect the farm operations, right? If you don't have enough time, a period of dry weather to put in a cover crop, then that will also affect soil health, right? Also, if you have extreme wet soil conditions for a long time, then you have to drive your tractors, your farm machines on that soil, wet soil condition that will cause additional, disruption to the soil structure. So I think these are the different, perspective or different angles that would all affect soil health. And Jason also asked about the average annual rainfall in the research area. I guess we have a rainfall about 600 millimeters here in the eastern Pennsylvania. Also, there's a question: how does your finding of significant relationship between tillage and soil organic matter compare with the mainstream understanding of the relationship? I explained a little bit in my presentation. I think it's understandable because, of course, there's in very well controlled experiment field studies, in those reductionist controlled environment or settings, of course you can see a negative relationship between tillage intensity and soil organic matter. But again, that was under a very well controlled environment in a few controlled experiment with replicates. But here, this study, it's a large scale survey. So each of these farms is managing things a little bit differently. All other factors that would affect soil organic matter may be very different from farm to farm. For example, some farms might have used a lot of tillage, but also have put in a lot of organic matter input, for example, compost. Then the compost organic input could offset the negative impact of intensive tillage. And actually, these kind of scenarios, they happen. They exist in the real world, right? So I don't think there is, conflict between the result of this study and the mainstream understanding of that tillage would affect soil organic matter negatively. It's just, different type of research. And in the real world, there are a lot more different factors than those, research stations where you have, well replicated control experiment. And there's a question about using a rotovorer. To be honest, I haven't heard that term. So also, there's a question from Jason. Is there any adverse effect over the physical property of the soil by the continuous use of rotavator for preparing the soil for cultivation? So I guess the rotavorer is kind of a rototiller that you use to prepare the soil, prepare the seed bed for seeding, right? Well, I would say any type of tillage, if it has a large score in the tillage index, it would affect the physical property of soil negatively. There's no doubt. The question is, can you minimize the use of that? Can you reduce the use of that? Here at Rodale Institute, our grain productions, we follow a 4-year rotation, which is corn, soybean, corn, first year corn, next year oats, and soybean and wheat, 4-year rotation. So we use cover crops every year. We use cover crops every year. And before corn, we use hairy vetch cover crop. And before soybean, we use the cereal rye cover crop. And we actually use intensive tillage, the moldboard plow, to establish the cover crops in the fall. For example, we use the moldboard plow to till the soil and prepare a seed bed to make sure that the establishment of the cereal rye and vetch is very good. Because the next year, in the spring, what we will do is to use a roller crimper to roll down the cover crop, no-till, and then plant cash crops into the residues of the cover crops. So the density and the biomass of the cover crop is critical for the next cash crop. When we roll down the cover crop using a roller crimper, then the residue of the cover crop will form a nice mulch to suppress the weeds. Then we don't need to continuously cultivate the soil for weed control. So in the year of corn and soybean, we don't need to till the soil. But in the year before, we used a moldboard plow to till the soil to prepare a perfect seed bed to make sure the establishment of cover crop is very, very good, very successful. Then we have more success in the year of cash crops. That's how we use the tillage strategically. We use that only to establish cover crops, but we don't use that to terminate the cover crops. And we have shown that the fall tillage has the least impact on the soil health than other timings. Jason also asked if we have earthworms in our soils. Of course we have earthworms. And last time when I went fishing, my son digged some earthworms as the base of fishing. So yes, we do have earthworm in our soils. here at Rodale Institute headquarters in Houston, Pennsylvania. This farm was bought in the year of 1970 or 71. So for 50 years, we have been managing things organically. All the fields except our long-term trial, farming system trial, and the vegetable system trial, except these trials, all other trials are, all other fields are managed in organic manners. The farming system trial and the vegetable system trial, they had the conventional, plots in those two trials. So they have, pesticide, herbicides, or synthetic fertilizers. But all other fields, we manage them organically. And we have been managing them organically for 40 or 50 years. So our biological activity is very good. And also, I want to mention that every single field in this in our institute is cover cropped in the wintertime. There's no bare ground in the winter here. Okay. Let's see if we have. Yes, Jason asked if we have frost here. And of course, here we're in eastern Pennsylvania. Although the winter is not as cold as places like Wisconsin, North Dakota, or Minnesota, we do have frost in the wintertime. And some, cover crops are winter killed, but also we use, many use two cover crops, winter rye, cereal rye, and hairy vetch. These two cover crops, they are, winter hardy, so they can survive the winter here. But it can get cold here. We have snow here. Okay, it's almost 3 o'clock. If there are no questions, again, I want to thank you everyone for attending this webinar. As usual, the webinar is recorded and will be posted on our website and our social media. If you are interested, please, you can send the link to your friends. They can watch them again. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.